Firstly, I'm Australian, so that might irritate some. I do apologise up front. As Graham was saying, I have an economics... sorry, I'm just trying to get my remote in here. I've got an economics background in technology, so I'm not an ad man. Cool. But I bring, hopefully, an interesting perspective. I'm going to actually tell you a whole bunch of things that that we've seen work in Quirk. I'm going to propose a blueprint for the future agency that's going to deliver work for clients. And clearly, from a client perspective, you guys will need to work with this blueprint, in my opinion. A lot of it will be controversial. Okay, that's not working, so I'm not going to even try. A lot of it will be controversial, so I do hope you guys will challenge me on a whole bunch of points. Okay, let's kick off. So art and code. This is unfortunately not coined by me, but it's obviously a twist on the art and copy view of advertising, when the art director and the copywriter used to work very well together. Well, still do. Rob will probably say they still do, and Ahmed as well. And I think they do, but it's an interesting kind of metaphor, because it says, well, maybe we should be considering these engineer types, these developer types, these guys who understand code, these guys that look at code and honestly see art. The very best coders will look at their code and other people's great code and see art. So a thought experiment first, and you can maybe challenge me later. Try and think of a campaign that could not be made better by digital. I think, just to reiterate what Ahmed was saying, digital is not the future, because that would then mean digital is going to replace a whole bunch of stuff, and that's just not the case. Digital is part of every single marketing and communications strategy, or should be. It makes every single medium better. Why does it make it better? Because it evokes a response. It should set out to evoke a response. But it doesn't replace advertising. Okay, this is a very, very important point. What makes my skin crawl is when people call digital a channel. I mean, if you want to irritate the living shit out of me, just come up to me and say digital is a channel. It's not a channel. It makes every other channel better. It's going to make TV interactive. Broadcast TV is on the decline. Print is on the decline. Guess what's going to save print? Digital execution. Digital billboards. Interactive billboards. Interactive, interesting product name. Interactive billboards that pick up, if you're allowed to, pick up your presence near it and maybe give you specific types of advertising. So digital is not the future. Digital is going to make what the guys like Ahmed and Rob and all the top ECDs, the successful ECDs, what they do, it's going to enhance that. But without the idea, without the strong concept embedded in the communication, no digital's going to save it. Okay, so the promise of digital is to hopefully evoke a response or an interaction. So digital takes that communication and makes it hopefully more visceral, because you can then interact with it. Okay, that's the aim. So I'll come back and you guys can challenge me. If you think of some kind of marketing communication that can't be made by digital, I'd love to hear it, because I haven't heard it before. So this is where the term originated. It's been originated by a really smart guy. Let me play it first, and then I'll tell you about him.
We are entering an age where agile creativity is going to be a competitive advantage.
That means learning from process models that relate to what advertising is becoming, which is an industry that's much more about technology.
We want to get our culture, our agencies, and everyone thinking more like agile developers.
Instead of art and copy, it's art and code. When you combine these two mindsets, that's when you get an idea that's relevant in the 21st century.
Okay, I just cut the clip short because you get the essence of what I'm trying to say, at least, that getting the technology closer to the idea is extremely important. Why has digital failed up till now? Why have all the top digital agencies around the world produced really shit digital? Why is that? Because they treat it as a channel. It becomes antecedent. It becomes, let's think of the idea, and then eventually digital is going to be production, and we'll give it to some developer, and then they will execute what we tell them to do. You can't do that. You need to bring digital at the ideas table, right at the start. As the brief comes in, with the strategy kicking off, the the technology guy, and I'm going to explain that a little bit more because I'm not talking about the stereotypical digital guy or technical guy, but someone who understands technology needs to be right there at the start. So it's very, very important, and you'll have a look at, I'll explain it a bit now, but Nike has guys from Weird and Kennedy, and they're called interactive creative directors. So what we're seeing is this evolution of technologists that understand the business. Ahmed made a very good point there. Great marketers are people who understand the business and solve business problems. They don't just create ads. Very, very important. So great marketers understand business, whether you're a technologist or an artist or a copywriter. But you need to be able to solve that business problem with technology through a great idea. And that's why the really, really great conceptualists, the really great creative directors will succeed in the so-called digital age. So what does art and code mean? Well, I kind of think it means this. It's a metaphor that I think is really apt. You're seeing the kind of intersection or almost the collision, but I think it's going to be a happy place. It's not going to be a nuclear war. But you're seeing the intersection between Silicon Valley, so web technology startups, and web technology entrepreneurship, and Madison Avenue, the traditional ad man. Clearly, there are large chunks of traditional or classical advertising that are going to become redundant or obsolete, rather. But the core value of classical advertising will remain because that was developing a key idea that solves a business problem. So Madison Avenue, classical advertising still has the upper hand. Digital agencies like us will struggle to usurp them. A lot of them are trying to buy agencies like us. And so clearly at some point in the future, there's no such thing as advertising agencies. We'll still call them that because that's the metaphor that's easy to cling on to. But they'll be strategic marketing and communications agencies. They will, as their main product, have a creative product that solves the business problem, independent of any channel. And digital will be embedded in all of that. You know, we as humans have chosen technology to be very close and very personal. And this is good for marketing and communications people because that allows us to get people to interact with our communication, assuming you've got a good communication. So we're seeing a lot, and Quirk's just gone through a very kind of difficult time. Ostensibly, we've been doing really, really well. Massive revenue growth, 4 years of 100% revenue growth, but internally our production has been it's been quite a harrowing time because what we've done is we've had this web technology blueprint on how to make digital stuff, but as it starts scaling, as we start producing more, we realize that actually there's a lot good in the classical production methodology. Traffic is highly underrated. A lot of digital agencies just don't traffic well. And so as you start getting scale, you start realizing that that's a problem. So we brought a whole bunch of that stuff in. I'm going to talk about it now. So Silicon Valley, web technology, about hackathons, about doing rapid prototyping, about loving and embracing code. All of those things are good. So is it a face-off? I guess that's the question. You know, how do we get, as agency bosses and agency management and clients, how do we get these two people to talk together? Let's assume that that future is right. How do we then get these two very, very different people to talk together? That's the question. That's the difficulty. And it is actually quite difficult to start with, but we've actually been doing it. So shit, that won't work. But we've been doing it, and we're finding now that these two types of people are actually very similar. The psychodemographic of these two individuals are actually very, very similar. The very best programmers, the very best developers are almost identical in the way in which they approach problems than creative directors, in my view. And I'd love you to challenge that. The psychodemographic for me is very, very similar. Creative directors, or creative people, very good creative people, let me not say creative directors, because there's some brilliant copywriters and art directors that haven't got their stripes yet. They look at a problem and they say, I know how to do this better. I think Ahmed talked about it. Don't do the same thing. They want to make it better. Even if they don't get it better, they believe viscerally that they're going to make this thing better. Developers, the very best developers, and by the way, the very best developers are about 100 times better than a good or very good developer. So the difference between world-class and very good, about 100 times. Okay. So I suggest you rather pay the extra 10K a month for the very best, or sometimes more. But in my view, they see a solution and they go, well, actually, I can do it better. The second thing is they have a strong desire to create stuff. That's a fairly obvious one. So I have a belief that almost all humans, gain a lot of what's called flow or happiness in creating stuff, in achieving. We all congenitally want to create stuff. But these guys have a hyperactive want and desire to create stuff, to the point where business doesn't really come into it. And you'll find yourself as clients and managers of these people trying to constrain them just a little bit so we can get stuff out the door if that's economical and that makes sense. But these guys will constantly iterate if given a chance. They will be almost finish a project and then move on to another one. They will try and work on lots of different stuff because clearly the creative part of their brain is so virile. And then this ability to think abstractly. So the problem, there's a lot of great creative people. All of us are creative in some way. But a lot of us actually are creative in very small increments and tactically, and will have one great idea. What the very best engineers, technology engineers, web technology development engineers, and the very best creatives have is the ability to think of quite a few of these good ideas that solve a business problem and understand how that will play out. Okay, and that's very, very important. What great creative directors do that developers actually don't have yet is the ability to articulate that. So that's kind of what differentiates them in my mind at the moment. But otherwise, I think they're almost identical in the way they think. The very, very best ones, that is.